Shout out to the legend, the conspiracy music guru, for some intro music. I am your host, Tom Foolery. Welcome back to another episode of Who's to Say? Oh, who's to say? There have been so many adventures completed and begun since the last time a podcast was released on this channel. Least of all is having a new old president of the United States, once again thwarting the women of this country from doing a job that arguably they cannot do. We'll talk about that. Presently, the sun is shining, and it's been a beautiful day to be outside, and only a little begrudgingly am I here to share some of the thoughts with you all, any of you all listening. Some live soon. Again, though, there will be some images and some things worth following along with visually, and still I'll do my best to commentate so no one is completely lost and I don't lose the thread. History appealed to me from early on as a youth. Being homeschooled and getting to pick and choose my interest in history, and growing up in New England, it's revolutionary, and then that leads to American Civil War, the War of Secession, as it's known in its more current time. And of course, even when we think of world wars or wars that consumed a lot of the, a continent or several continents' attention, there is still so much of the world that just keeps on breathing, moving, working, living, dying outside of that. And yet we might take for granted just how influenced our present lives are by war. Financially, emotionally, it impacts the morals of a country. And when we take a look at people who are in positions of the obligation is beyond people who consider themselves citizens and voters. Well, let me say this: you would have to accept that premise, that reality. That's one that I see from what I think I know, but to some degree have some evidence of that. And this is not conspiracy. This is Wetiko. This is the philosophies of an era that guide them. And we're going to talk about one particular philosopher today by the name of Francis Bacon. If you don't know him, you can hit pause and go fucking Wikipedia Sir Francis Bacon. I don't care what you have to do for his time in the 17th century. And and I can do a fact check myself live just to make sure that I give you the right timeline for Francis Bacon when he was, yes, through the better part of the 16th century and early 17th, yes. So lived a pretty decent life, but he was born in 1561 in London, as the records go, just outside of Whitehall. And the rest is history for his political involvement and his work in espionage. So the point I'm making is figures like that had huge influence on the philosophy and therefore the guiding ethics and sometimes morals of their day. At least values, at least cultural, social values, which are all immeasurably dynamic elements of a reality to influence. And they did, and people do, and you have to accept that to understand that, or to at least have some understanding of the fact that the people who are selected or elected, either or, I'm open to both. It looks like selection when you only get a couple of choices. they are beholden to people of more consequential influence, big banks and the cornerstones of the economy. And if those people were to face any obstacles at this point, a lot of them would crumble, and therefore we would all suffer. So it's not without consequence that this is all kept in balance. For all the good and all the positive and all the growth, there is destruction and limitation and rigidity of other systems. So that's all in balance. But even still, it pays for our understanding to assess what might be some of the influences of our day as well. And so, I mean, one that comes to mind just while I'm thinking of it would be Shakespeare and Francis Bacon again. Just to follow that trail for a moment, because that set the tone, along with the King James Bible, for the English Empire. Which, if someone thinks that just because of the war for independence that England no longer has any influence over America, which they did for hundreds of years until that point, and had the largest empire the world has ever known, subjugating places like Ireland, like India, called the island countries of the world, South Africa, for their fucking diamonds. I mean, all, and then to have the money to run the drug trade of opium to and from China. Like that is the English legacy at its highest levels of power. And the English people of all creeds and continents have been subjected and subjugated to that. And it's been, the countries that have been the most diabolically affected possibly by all of it, by the restrictions, and then also what, again, these philosophical principles of transhumanism and fear and only the material reality and only scientism. It leads to things like flatten the curve at all costs and penalize people and injure them because of these anti-life principles. And the countries that were the most hard hit by that were the Elizabethan countries, for lack of a better term, the crown countries, and even those still with some links, which is certainly the United States, which is certainly places like India, still have devastating effects of that influence because it's so old, because that was all of the momentum that went into the governance and the control of people in these countries and colonies. And to do it through violent means, I mean, the ways in which the Irish were subjugated, and fucking Irish, man, I mean, like the South Africans, fucking fierce people. And I mean, yeah, they had to starve them, slaughter them, again, all for control. And you can have plenty of sympathy and empathy for these people who just want control. They just want things to be good and great, or at least for them, or for everyone. It almost doesn't matter, because it's such a strangulation of at least some life, if not most of life. And that's where you get resistance from a place like Ireland and India and beyond. And thankfully, the things that we have seen work for the most part. I mean, Gandhi certainly, from plenty of histories, played a role in some sort of conspiracy, again, just to bring about the change. What sacrifices did he have to make for a lot of positive sacrifices of his character and then his life, of course. Public figures being killed off is rooted in the stories of Shakespeare. When those get promulgated and circulated loudly, then we do have an unconscious association with that being the right of rulership. Like, yeah, they can just fucking kill people, they're in charge. They can just decimate people, they're in charge. And if they do that to us, they're in charge. I mean, that's a lot of the surrender that we all forfeit on a regular basis is putting other people in charge of us. And a lot of that does happen through social engineering. And people I follow are good to highlight just the preponderance. The reason, so forgive me for drinking my tea. The selection season we just went through is so heavily influenced by the people who depend on it, which are the people tasked with running the big banks and the airlines and the grocery stores and the food supply and the oil and the electric and all that stuff. Pharmaceuticals, somehow I neglected to mention healthcare industry. I mean, that whole leg of the beast. People in charge of that, I mean, yeah, they're very anxious about any sort of change, and they have to be out in front of that and adapt to that. And so to the degree that they influence control over policymakers or opinion makers, which there are plenty of those, which is one of the other legs of the beast, which is presence of media. And there are so many different times of influencers now, but for as much as people in the truther community harp on what Leonardo DiCaprio says in favor of the Obamas or World Economic Forum or climate change, or what Taylor Swift or what Cardi B, for real, I mean, fucking Camilla's on stage with Megan Thee Stallion and Cardi B and still can't win, so that's not the real popular vote, and not just because it's black people, or I know plenty of white people who listen to that fucking shit, and it's ridiculous. I'm sorry, I'm swearing a lot today. I'm fired up by this stuff because it's just so fascinating. I am fully, I want to tell everyone, I know I've been anti-vax in the past, but I am fully fascinated. So there's so much going on. For the record, I don't have to be anti anything about vax. It's not in opposition to that. It's a completely different paradigm of understanding health and measures you can take to protect your health. So there's certainly plenty to be said on that. So yeah, the manifold ways that people are influenced by all the media inputs for us, outputs by the media, by a couple of countries, by or companies rather, by a handful of interests of what they want to see. And social engineering began in the time most likely of Shakespeare most heavily. Again, that's the English Empire using the responsibility. And I'll just launch into this now, guys, because this has been on my mind for half this year now, and a lot more lately. Thinking about just that track, just trying to get a better sense of some of the more influential aspects of history. And a lot of history is forged or corrected or well, so the Bible, for instance, which some people view as historical, or even if they just focus on the word and the allegory, etc., it has still been written by committee, reauthored, edited, censored, translated, retranslated through the King James Bible and beyond. So I mean, yeah, we're grateful to still have pieces like that, but just understand it's something that is not a clear picture of where we were and who we were at that time, such as those pages reference. And sure, Shakespeare, you get a little bit closer, but there's enough historical evidence out there to support that we really don't have much of a connection to anything beyond the 18th century for some validity. And that, of course, is the culmination of which is the Great American Experiment, and the rest of that is history. So American history, I think my position as of now at the end of November in this calendar 2024, which again I've spoken on, is not a real mark of any time. I mean, it's cool for some numerology, and this being an 8-year, and and the significance of infinity, and the zeros and the mirroring twos, and yeah, for plenty to be said for that. But where I stand now with history and any of that marking of time is that even American history, it's hard to know the whys and the what fors. I mean, some of the whats and wheres and whens, sure, I'm good with that. Beyond the 17th century, the whats and wheres and whens are hard to pinpoint, as are the whys and the hows. So we just take them as lessons and myth. And again, this is why myth is valuable, because even the thing, what was I watching the other day? I think I was rewatching Vikings when someone said, "Oh, that's just a story," and oh, that's right. To paint the scene for you, Queen Lagertha is presiding over her husband's Viking earldom, not a kingdom, just their local earldom. So all the villagers and people probably know her, at least, even though she's new to the throne, while her husband is away in England for only the second or third time raiding those lands and trying to develop a relationship with the royalty there. So someone comes to her accusing his wife of bearing an illegitimate child with a wayfarer, with a traveler. And Lagertha says, "Congratulations, you've been visited by the gods. You've been celebrating." And the man says, "That's just a story." And she says, "Our whole lives are just stories." And so any story can be read and entertained and seen for its lessons in good and bad, whatever you deem to be evil about that. This is where our language and our unexamined beliefs get us into trouble, of just thinking that what is right factually might be good morally. It's not fucking the same thing at all, in my mind. And if you disagree, please let me know in comments and messages, and call me if you can. You've got options. Just had to get a little more air in here. Now that it is nearly the winter time, where circulation of blood and air and light and water are all essential and worthy focuses of this time. And we get to, for whatever it's worth, get to maybe spend a little bit more time reading by the fire. Maybe not too late into the night, because we'll be going to bed sooner than later. And before we get into that, one departure from the Shakespeare and the media discussion is, well, yeah, we can do this first because it's relevant to the last episode, and I want to. No, I need to make that bigger. Sort of. No. Sorry, guys. Okay. We're working on it. That's a little bit better. So, although I will zoom where and how I can, because it's not super easy to read, but this is because astrology and reference to the planets, it's part of the many rich symbolic aspects of reading Shakespeare, and we can appreciate it for the gems among that. It's not all amazing work, and that's what's so interesting, is the morality. It's I mean, the plots too, I guess, but the morality and the depth of the Shakespeare plays vary. They're not all triumphs of the human spirit. I mean, sure, there's a collection of them, but the historical plays of Henry VIII and Henry V, or Henry V rather, and the like, versus Romeo and Juliet or things like that, they vary greatly in their morals and the depth of those characters, and any lessons therein, culminating with the Tempest, which is really just about, as it's been distilled to me. I want to give credit where it's due. Robert Frederick, The Hidden Life is Best podcast, unearthing all of this in depth, that is so fascinating and entertaining in its own right, to have an overstanding of the social engineering behind Shakespeare, along with the brilliance in it, and that brilliance can only come from a collective genius, likely not isolated in one man. This is just to say, as a brief counter biography, that there being such little evidence for the character of William Shakespeare, that it's so laughable, and for him to be a commoner from Stratford upon Avon and being illiterate and no schooling. Robert talks about this, which is so easy to entertain, that Mark Twain was offended by that idea that Shakespeare was a commoner genius, because Mark Twain was a self-taught commoner genius, and he actually was, and he wrote about what he knew. And Shakespeare's plays are all about the court and royalty and far seas adventures and lands that he's not has never had never been to, of Italy and excuse me, beyond. And so it's highly unlikely that prospect, to say nothing of several others. So come bring in, if it's John Dee, if it's Francis Bacon, if it's a committee, which I think, if it's influenced by guys like that, and especially Bacon, and Francis Bacon Society writes about that. These aren't novel ideas. This is just to say that, well, first of all, how does this relate to this cell salt astrological chart that I'm bringing to you now? Because I mean, these things are all still have their symbolism in works of tradition like Shakespeare, and especially the classics going back to, which are older pieces of still great influence because of their symbology. And again, the story, the myths, that it doesn't matter if they're true, they're still true in us, in the way that we act them out in our own dynamics. I'm sure we've all used the Trojan horse, to manipulate our way into a situation, whether it was conscious or subconscious. That's to say nothing of that being done on a grand scale for real in warfare, and spiritual warfare as well, in the war that we're all a part of now. So that's why I am drawn to things like having an education around tissue salts, which can be aptly applied based on the things like your astrology. Which, so this points out that if you, with a conception date of March 1st, for instance, producing a born full term, if it's 9 months to the day, on December 21st, which is right on the cusp of Sagittarius and Capricorn. What you then have, if you're so for a visual, if you're looking at the astrological chart, the circle at the horizon, if you drew a horizontal line separating into two hemispheres, and then dividing it into 12 equal parts, what you get at from left to right, rising across, the first 12th section right at the left-hand horizon is the conception date of March 21st, commencing the sign of Aries, this is when the real calendar begins, because this is the start of an astrological year, followed by Taurus, Gemini to round out that first quarter. What you end up with is this 9-month term, culminating in between the 9th and 10th signs of Sagittarius and Capricorn. So 3 months of the year in our human life. This is interesting about humans. Why is it not 12? Are we somewhat premature? For other animals to be somewhat rushed into life, if they get a winter or whatever, born in the spring, how do they compare? Because some of those animals come out on 4 legs, ready to sprint, and it takes us a little while to get our way in the world, to say nothing of how we use our organs and senses to develop a relationship with survival, thrival, fear, love. These tissue salts can have an influence on that as well, as long as you're healthy. So 3 signs, 3 sections, 3, almost a season of the year. It is a season of the year. It is a quarter of the year. You were not in the womb. You were not on your way into life. So there is a deficiency there in your body that you might consider. So for instance, if you're born around Christmas time or just before, then your deficiencies would be in what's related to, if we think about it, some of even how we think, how we think of the year going into spring. You might be struggling a little bit with digestion, for instance. You might be struggling with some circulation issues as well in the blood. Those are 2 heat Just to fire element associated thing, but also, I mean, this chart is as detailed to say is talk about things like bones and knees. You can have issues there with those particular structures, and then of course the complementary and compensatory tissue salts are listed there as well to take calcium and sodium and phosphorus-based supplements would be in your favor to stimulate some of that hardness as well to have the bone structure, but also the heat circulation as well, the fire for things like digestion. And I see feet is on here as well, which is interesting. But that's the base of the body. Like you start in Aries from, and you work your way down through the head, the development of the brain, and then down through the trunk, and then culminating. That's why the last couple signs are bones, knees, ankles, and feet. So if you might have, I think that's interesting because I think a lot of successful athletes are Pisces, if I'm remembering that correctly, or I mean, just mentioning like they have lower leg stability if they're born in those signs. They don't have a deficiency there. So this is fascinating stuff to me, because astrology is not some fucking guess by someone trying to be hip, as it's been misled. Again, inversions. I mean, the things that you could even say this for religion. I mean, or to have a spiritual life guided by some faith with a history and with stories. I think those things can be valuable. The inversion is for control. If astrological, if astrology, the way it's been purported to distract people, is an inversion, then I think there's plenty of truth there, because it's referred to as the sky clock. So there's a time imprint, there's a numerological and symbolical imprint on how you came into the world and where in the world you are and how those stars were arranged depending on that situation, because those stars have been overseeing and therefore influencing all of history in this realm. It is my most magnificent guess, but that's based on my present knowledge of their presence in this world, and as it's been recorded through different religions and cultures and traditions and histories. So the value there is immense. And so you can look at it like that. I recommend the work of Robert Phoenix, who's done readings for people I know, and just the way he presents it is very digestible. He doesn't focus as much, I think other people might, on the astrological component, but that's where I am especially most drawn to, because for it to give you direction on how you might, it's a cliche, but that disease, that lack of ease, is deficiency. And there are other things to disease, as well as how things get inside of us and how we try to navigate things like inflammation or poor digestion, which are deep. Those are emotional. Those are deep, because it's psychosomatic. Whatever exists on a psychological, emotional level has a presence in the body. There is no mind to body connection. It is mind body. It is body mind. Whatever occurs is registered both ways. A physical shock is registered in both directions and all around. And so to have an awareness of, for instance, what is associated with some of these, and this is a great transfer to what I would like to discuss and present next, which is, if I can just remove this one for now, which includes another continuation from last time. Do I have that right? Yes, I do. So to think about, so that's a great dynamic way to look at the body. And again, when you can think about just when you are in this time of year that we're in the time of Scorpio and approaching Sagittarius. For instance, I can tell you that there is a relationship to the 12th salt, which is interesting, I think, which is silica. so connective tissue, and that's a cellular cleanser because it's a cleanser because I think of it as a binder, to deal with mucous membrane. And this is why we get things that we think are flus and colds. It's because it's the time of year where our body is prepared to actively cleanse those things. And hips and thighs, interestingly enough, are the association with Scorpio. With Sagittarius. I'm talking about the season that we're approaching, because Scorpio, as we know, because of the sexual energy, the procreative organs are what are on the table for evaluation during the time of Scorpio. I mean, as it's said about Trump, the guy has balls. Kamala does not have any balls. Well, that I don't know. I mean, she may keep some in her pocket. She may have some herself. Who knows? They were rocking that time of the year, and the guy obviously with balls came out on top. Is all I'm saying for now. So tissue salts are a gateway to interact with this time of year. If again we find things like it's funny, digestion is associated with the Capricorn sign after Christmas, after holidays. When people might just be wanting to pay attention to that. So all very interesting. And so like I said, with an astrology, with the things that we might have deficiency and disease with, are registered and are therefore we have to interact with these things on a daily basis within our body. And I think this is so valuable what I'm bringing to you now. Let's see if I can just get rid of. There we go. Thank you, Eileen McCusick's Biofield Anatomy and the significance of energetic imbalance. So Eileen McCusick's at biofieldtuning.com. Let me get some more water here so I can enunciate to tell you where to go for this brilliance that I've been honored to receive. Biofieldtuning.com. And it is the biofield anatomy, the significance of energetic imbalances. And it gives you an interesting visual of what it's so funny. God damn the fucking cancel clear. Gosh darn the millennials and whoever's below them, I forget, for stealing great words like vibes and aura, because these are very real things. And here's a great depiction visual of what that means for the human body. And as we likely discussed last time, the right side is the masculine, or as Eileen describes it, the ancestral father river. I mean, the river being, this is a stream of energy as is depicted here. But just to think of the right side for most of history as that's been given to us, the instruction of physical combat, hand-to-hand combat with the right hand, and focus on the right side, would that being the masculine side, the left side being the feminine side, the ancestral mother side. And so if we take, for instance, and thankfully this goes all the way down to the feet, it does highlight the chakra centers, 7 in this case. I think that's true. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe with the sun star. Either's fine. I'm good with either. There's 50 chakras in other traditions, and I'm only exaggerating slightly. However, when you think about, when we talk about vibes and alignment and chakras and balancing these things through whatever practices, there's many practices. I don't know if your average yoga class really does that, to say nothing of how it can challenge your body with flaccid muscles and postures that just most people don't have any body awareness for, which sure you can develop it through that, but there's other ways too. These energetic centers have been proven. So when we have chakras that we engage with in a real way, with some level of curiosity, like these reveal some answers to us, then we get to make great healing progress physically. And so, you can turn that into physical practice, or you can start from the core and start from this emotional or deeply intellectual side. And and either should work. I mean, that's the thing. We get to play around with it. So, for instance, I think I mentioned last time that I did have some associations with this particular description and how it was presenting in my body and how it turned into injury in my body, which I can speak on another time. But around the root chakra, which is stability and finance and safety, and I think I have that right. Maybe finance a little bit into certainly a transfer up to the second chakra, but to feel rooted, grounded, safe, cared for, etc. So of course these things are associated with father and mother, our first access to those that externally. And the left side association with that is things we want to be doing, being, or having, and therefore the unmet needs that come from that. And I can say personally from my experience that manifested in an injury for me, and closely associated with that as well is frustration and disappointment on this feminine side. This feeling of hurt. The right side alternative of that in that area are the overdoing, or the overaction, which is burnout. Which is why you have fatigue, and why if you're a man who's overstressed, like women too. I mean, if you have an association with this disposition, with this behavior set that is more masculine, that is more involved with the father side of overdoing, overthinking. Overthinking, I think in general we do associate with women, and that comes from having to compensate, being with men who they do have some level of anxiety about, whether that's just disconnect on an emotional level or safety level, physical level, etc. And there's just as there's a war on masculinity and really trying to soften it. Masculinity is intended to have edges. It is the line consciousness. It is the arrow, the sword, the phallus. It is that piercing edge that the masculine is intended to have for action, for protection, for so many things that are essential to a balanced realm, to a healthy body. So the war on that to completely soften or subdue the edges of men, of their thinking, feeling, and physical faculties, it's been full on for years. You can't fight real wars. I mean, and then the fucking wars of today in Ukraine and now the Middle East are just decimating another generation. See, this is what we don't appreciate about the war function, propping up society, is it does keep people on that edge, and it does satisfy some misguided hunger that people have for dominance and for violence like that. Even though, I mean, because there are people who in America, for instance, who support those wars to some degree, is like, yeah, I mean, the Ukrainians, have, kill all the Russians you can, kill Putin, kill any Russian you see. That's what you got to do. It's same for the Jews and the Muslims, and so there are people on board with that. And if you had enough men capable of saying no to that machine, then so many of we'd be on our way to healing so many more problems. And we're not, and so it goes, and so we all have to find a way to strike a balance there. The psyop and the violence on women is wild through telling them what they should be doing, of basically being a wholly masculine figure, and encouraging the transhumanism movement of encouraging things like that. You don't need a man, or you don't even need a woman. You don't even need a womb to bring a life into this world. And or if it's just in vitro, if it's just IVF, that you don't even need a man. And there are huge agendas behind that. Again, separating men and women. I think the transhumanism movement, along with is the parent to transgenderism, and that's mostly an affront on women. I think it's more offensive if you have men saying that they are women. And not just for the violence of locker rooms and things like that. I think that's just that's, to me, that's the more offensive inversion. And then it just leads to women, thinking that they need to be men. And I'll hold space for people who just at their core have some sense of that they feel compelled to be in a different body, different type of body, different type of identity. And I think most of the influences is what you get from culture, and again, these anti-life, and some of them are some, again, some balance of luciferic or Ahrimanic values that are either escapist based in Lucifer, or Ahriman, which is so here, and you can just manipulate the material, and that's all that matters. You can just remove an organ here, a sex organ there, uh, change a body part or a cosmetic surgery there, and for some reason think that will not have dire consequences on a whole life, and therefore on other organs and the blood system, and of course the brain and the heart, and these organs that we rely on to get through life. And so that's why we lean into tools like this to access our ability to heal these things, is because we all have some level of interaction with I'm just bouncing all over the map here: sadness, grief, loss, absolutely, guilt, shame, speaking but not being heard, challenges with attachment and letting go. And so I think it's really especially uh, necessary to investigate these things and say, okay, when I am looking to heal, where do I go in my body as well as in my psyche? And this is all my field. I mean, that's what's so beautiful is these concepts of the relationship with our mother, the relationship with our father, how that looks like busyness and overdoing, how that looks like things we want to be doing, the things we don't say, et cetera, et cetera. There's manifold ways of consuming this material, and I'm so grateful to Eileen McCusick for it. That's a whole journey, but this is our field, and it is all things physical and mental, emotional. And you can also try to balance out in this equation past lives and ancestry, and this very much is, again, how we end up with youths, and therefore people, and hurting people. The reason that can be so powerful and potent in a society, when it's then afflicted by social engineering, is, yeah, you do get inherited trauma retained in the physiology to a degree, especially because it's then relived by people who haven't healed, by parents who haven't healed, and therefore, yeah, this is why I say we haven't made any progress in those ways of living to really move the needle in our collective consciousness. That's why we still face issues of war, poverty, scarcity, control, abuse. It's a big reason why. So to heal and recognize our wholeness, that our hearts, minds, and bodies are always striving toward. The mind, God bless it, for sure. It's trying to balance out a lot, and it's mostly confronted with the external and our ability to perceive. Although, thanks to, I'm grateful to the work of Rudolf Steiner, who, through spiritual science, is marrying the experience of our field, which is most greatly influenced by these things that we give name to, like sadness, happiness, guilt, shame, pride, to create our energetic field. And then, yes, our human experience, our brain still has a major part to play in that. However, it is our heart where we know that is our greatest organ of perception, and its relationship to the blood, the blood being this delicately and powerfully sensitive organ for our life force, again, and how we know that we're alive. Is it in a sexual moment? Is it in a moment of achievement, or recovery from moments of loss, or depression? Is it the loss itself that lets us know that we're alive? Because fuck this, this been into some heavy stuff lately, and this is all coming out. This is all part of the experience worth sharing and worth talking about. So yeah, for all the tools that we have, we need to bring them inward as well as outward, and use tools on your body, and as best you can, try to let them be the simplest of tools for your body. Uh, Using tennis balls for faster release, using water, using a tool can be a fast. Again, you don't have to abuse that. So just to say that the tools should be simple and not relying on things like again, the over technocratic, technological, transhumanist agenda that we are besieged with on a regular basis. And again, to be under constant stress from most likely just the overwhelm of things that happen on a regular basis through whatever you think of the news. I mean, I think to some degree, so, the, the theater is happening there, and I wanted to bring in this Shakespeare discussion again. What was I reading about? It was most likely a quote by Francis Bacon about the whoever controls the theater controls the nation or the world, and he was keen on it. He wrote about and lived about his belief that the ambition to control the universe is the greatest aim of a man. I mean, you can get that in a purely prideful way. Thankfully, the people I admire are more seeking a greater personal relationship with God and therefore their family and therefore themselves, and that's certainly more akin to the journey that I'm on. So I'm more open to listening to them as opposed to the control and dominance philosophies, and yet those are what dominate. And so from there, we also have the theater of war and how that distracts and consumes people. And then we also have, if it's happening on a screen, people, I really don't know how much, including this. I mean, I'm putting on a show for you to a degree. I'm starting to treat this more like a show. If that's, I hope that's obvious. I mean, there's a presentation component for sure. I know I still want to, I'm gonna play with this a little bit to make it more user friendly for you guys. Yes, to make it more engaging like that, because I have great examples for. I mean, I have fun with this stuff. I hope y'all can dig that, because it is how I keep coming back to this work and just drawing as many connections as I can for my benefit to see pattern. I mean, there's a part of genius that can be developed that is pattern recognition. And I've got 3 decades on this earth, and maybe 2 of them I'm paying attention. So I've got some work to do. I'll be good to myself. Maybe 3 years of really paying attention to what's happening around me, and more essentially what's happening within me, because I've had the gnosis that, especially what I consider reactions and emotional reactions or thought reactions, they come from within me. I can blame someone else all I want for that, and yet all you have are examples of people who took catastrophe, disaster, as I've reflected in the past, disaster from the astral realm from the stars. What is it in your astrology chart? And I think those things can be revealed, that where you struggle, where is that in your chart? Where you succeed, where you have strength, where you have weakness, where is that in your chart? Because that's what disaster feels like, is do I learn and leap from it and acknowledge that shadow and have a relationship with it, or does it keep getting me in the heel time and time again? And that's part of paying attention. Just another way of paying attention. Again, you can go into the body like this. So it's hard. Again, this is focus and attention. For what we focus on expands, and what we consume expands. When it's the theater of what goes on a screen, not just what I'm telling you, I mean, not just what I'm showing you, social media screen, so your phone screen, your news screen, that's really overwhelming. And our response, I think, to overwhelm is numbness to a degree. Again, when I hear, what am I looking for here? Thank you. When I hear just see, I gotta do this if you want to read this with me. Give me 1 second. Thank you. just to read this quote from Michael Hoffman. Uh, yeah, the things that people are consumed by. I have a peripheral awareness of what is considered mainstream news, and it's to keep me grounded. It's because every now and again you just come back to, well, is what I think rooted in any reality if everyone's saying this other thing. Uh, and so you can get beat to death with that shit, and like for real, because I mean I felt it, and it cuts both ways. The two edges of that coin are in pursuit of truth and or at least unearthing many of the lies that have been told, and a lot of them shroud history. And that's what's so frustrating, is that you want a grasp of history until you start the re-education and the unlearning process, that so much of history has been influenced. It is a cliche to talk about how the winners write history, and then who wins after them, and then who wins after them, and what narrative do they need to uphold about the goodness of Catholicism or the badness of the slave trade. Again, roads leading back to Rome and to England. England started the slave trade, and they should not be celebrated for beating America to the punch of abolishing it. And they still just, I mean, they started the fucking human trafficking, or they're very much complicit in the human trafficking slave trade. So there's no abstention from that level of Watiko, of control, again, of real control, that would that that the powers that are and should not be, and that I do not recognize as real power in my life, the dead ones and the old ones and the people who are here now. Okay, yeah, they're definitely packing a punch with some level of power. I'll give them that. And the way things are, they have been inculcated by the highest levels of knowledge in most cases. And that's another thread back to Shakespeare, is that because the authorship and the products of Shakespeare were for the aristocracy and for the ruling class to reinforce a lot of their held beliefs around power and faith, and certainly power dynamics. And you just fucking kill people, like I said, when they get in your way, or you just kill yourself when it's too much for you to bear. But no love for the commoners. Such a farce to say that Shakespeare was a commoner and then wrote about all that stuff, and there's no good commoners in his plays. And again, who the sonnets were written for. So the momentum of, I mean, yes, they know some, and the kin to carry on these traditions of influence are the people, like, starting with Bacon, but it turns into Hitler and Churchill and Rothschilds and Bushes and Rosicrucians and Rockefellers and all these people who really are descendants of black magicians. Starting, Bacon being a spy and having to have so much occult wisdom at that time to rise, to then be able to operate at the highest levels of espionage and be internationally fluent, because the symbols that are universal, the language and the belief systems that are universal at the highest levels of influence. And these people do have an understanding of the rituals of power and control. And I'm going from my notes here to make the to make the resistance completely futile. They've been involved in the technocracy to have access to people for the programming that makes them easier to control because of their interface with technology. And I'm guilty of this too, guys. It is a dependence on technology that is so easy to manipulate for people. And that is and was and remains the slippery slope for digital ID, for things like vaccines during the COVID years, and then CBDC, central bank digital currencies, having that stuff only be digital. Like, if you choose, and as I mentioned on a recent episode, for Real ID, for that being the core interface, if you don't validate through your fingerprint, through your spit, through your eye, your bio data, then you don't have the ability to use these things, to have currency, to get into public venues or whatever, that's a fucking problem, because that is such an invasion and such a surrender of, again, your body. That's why I was never down with, like, I don't do Face ID. I cover up my cameras when I'm not doing stuff like this. I don't give away my finger, but the paying with your palm at Whole Foods absolutely befuddles me, that people think that that's okay. And again, just not part of the transhumanist movement, that is a your resistance is an aberration, and to stack those aberrations gives you a lot of momentum. But the aberrations and the preponderances of overwhelm that we are mostly confronted with has led to this great reflection by Michael Hoffman, and I'm quoting. He has a great, I think his Substack is called Revisionist History. If not, you can look up revisionisthistory.org. And Michael Hoffman, being an elite student of history, reflects on these matters with thoughts such as, quote, "Why are Americans inert, indeed almost paralyzed in the midst of so many dramatic revelations lately concerning the perfidious iniquity of our rulers? Centuries ago, it was deduced that in this time and place, after enough immersion in the alchemical crucible, the people would be in a psychological decay state where we are exhausted by the truth." And I'll pause there to say that, as I said, the two sides of that coin are that for all the revelations that come out, and for truthers that are ahead of every conspiracy theory, and I'll bring one earlier point full circle here, if you're still with us from the beginning. As much as we talk about the media influence, I was listening off to people like Taylor Swift or Leo DiCaprio or Obama's or whatever, staying more in the entertainment space. Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, Dana White, those are all still highly influential people playing the game for a Trump. And I bring up Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan because people, if you think of them as truthers, they're fucking late and weak and soft on everything of any import is my opinion on it. And for all the good guests that they can have on, they're all only generally approved for certain narratives, and that's fine. It was part of my journey. It's part of people's journeys to better health and awakening. I think it opens the door. But so even when you tune into some level of lies turning into truth, it can be exhausting. And Hoffman continues, in past generations, revelations of high crimes would have been revitalizing incentives to concerted action in bringing perpetrators to justice. In the West, in Century 21's Society of the Spectacle, they are mostly grist for the thrill of the week on the part of a mass of degenerate voyeurs spectating at their own demise, at which they aspire to obtain a front row seat. And I would agree with Mr. Hoffman there, because there is so much of that, is the people who just say, "Oh, not surprised." Like, it's either I'm not surprised or, "Oh, I am surprised," and some level of intrigue, and just, what are you gonna do about it? Whatever. There's plenty of that too, and so I'm grateful for people like Owen Benjamin, who inspire me so much, because he reflects on to this degree of truth that it's all because we consent. It's all because we buy into it. It's all because we feel like we need it. We need the spectacle to be propped up. And there's some unfortunate truth to that. I'm sorry to say, because again, that's the investment of energy that we're all so connected to. And there are these diabolical. I want to weave in a couple more elements from Shakespeare and this great delve into Francis Bacon's influence over it, and of course that's rooted in Freemasonry. Macbeth is referred to as the Scottish play, and the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry is world renowned for their I believe it's something like, not this is a qualification and a potential correction, that most or all, it's something like, I forget if it's the last 45 or 45 years of prime ministers have all been Freemasons. And they're not necessarily all from the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, although that is arguably one of the most popular in the United Kingdom. And that has great depths in history, going back to Rosicrucians from Templars, or with the Rosicrucians rather, coming out of that, or coming up within that tradition. But from Templars, from the preceding the Middle Ages and what is alleged to be the time of Christ. So deep history here, guys, and then the impact on, of course, all the presidents that have 15 Freemason presidents that we know of. That's a big deal. All of the presidents, including Clinton's and even people like whatever Hillary's family is, Trump's and Biden's, all being descendants of either Charlemagne or King Edward II, I think it is. So this royalty, this is why Shakespeare is such a cornerstone of society, and why the stories are worth looking into to unravel, because they set the tone for so much of how we engage with power. For better or worse, I'm not saying that I really dig how it's portrayed and how it's put out there, because I don't. It has way more to do with that I find this interesting enough to question, and therefore revisit, and again try to hold some density of space for how these ideas have imprinted our world, and therefore our election season. Again, bring in astrology. It's not for any reason that that the selections in the United States take place in November, the time of Scorpio, on a Tuesday, which is the day of Mars, which is Aries. For that dominance, that power, like the symbolism is so imbued into our experience that indelible factor, and yet it's still there for us to look into, team. That's what I'm trying to inspire. Is you look into it, you make meaning out of it for yourself, instead of just being blindly and unwittingly consenting to it, this is the thing, is the powers that should not be, if they're going to oppress us, they still need our consent, and therefore there are always doors left open for you to walk through. I say always, I mean many ways for us to walk through and rescind our consent and channel that into building, as I mentioned in recent episodes and highlighted for great content from the Way Forward podcast that I'll link to, alternative systems and just alternative paradigms and perspectives to heal. Because you cannot, if we're in the same level of consciousness, if we're in the same level of vibration as what's going on now, then we need to seek to change it. It does have to be something different. It does have to be a departure. And so if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But if it is broken and you're only trying to fix it with the tools that you think are the only ones, again, that will never work, and that's never been done. Or, in the example of communism, because people just say, oh, it's never been done the right way. There are only a few tools there to bring about communism. And interestingly enough, this is what's so great about this history as well, is all of the movements of both capitalism and communism and fascism and empiricism all came out of the part of the world called England and London. Modern finance came out of London. Transhumanism comes out of London. So all roads lead to London, which is all roads lead to Rome, which is all roads lead to Washington, D.C. Those are the three capitals of the world. Certainly plenty more to speak on there. But if we're to focus on London and just round out, one other, Robert Frederick does a great job of presenting the information around Gnosticism, which is so many things can be said about Gnosticism. That agnostic is the belief in not knowing, even though I think most people claim agnostic because they're afraid of atheists, and they should be. It's a rough way to be without any belief in God, or to deny it. And then one of the great ways to combat logical fallacies with simple tools is just to say you cannot negate something that doesn't exist. So you're validating its existence in the negation. You can negate, you can claim it doesn't exist, but even then, it's still hard to you twist yourself in knots. So existence, as far as we know, should be something that we can define or experience. My limited language doesn't quite describe it, and yet, so gnosis is something else. Gnosis is a deep knowledge, intuition. It's certainly associated with Christianity and mythic Christianity. However, the theory, I'll say, for lack of a better word, the belief that tradition had a great imprint on the work of Shakespeare through Francis Bacon or the committee of people therein at that time, is rooted in a precept from Gnosticism that they are trying to transcend beyond this prison planet, to go beyond the god of this earth, so to speak, and not really talk about a higher realm. But so inversion is a big part of maybe some of the things that do seem a little vague, or even just in a surface sinister specter, to be poetic and to take up the tradition of beautiful language that were initially inspired by people like Shakespeare and then William Blake. I'm really delving into William Blake these days, and so that's a podcast for another time, because what a wild cat he appears to have been. It can be a little sinister because like I said, the morality in the plays is not great. So Macbeth, I mean, this is a final last heavy dose of gravy of to make the knowledge of this realm really delicious. You got to have some fucking gravy, right? So the experience in our world of how public figures are often removed from the world stage, the theater that is our popular experience, whether it's royalty or sports figures or whatever. Princess Di, they told her she was gonna die. They were calling her Di. Like, come on. There is, thanks to the work of Michael Hoffman, there is a keen and more clear perspective around the assassination of John F. Kennedy so publicly in that place with the players involved, that is associated with Macbeth. And I won't get into all the details now. That information is out there. But these are called king kill rituals. And I mean, that's the story of Macbeth, and it's the story of plenty of other biblical stories, and certainly played out on the world stage, or at least, whether it's Napoleon or Tales from Rome. That myth is out there. And in the modern Western world, we have plays like Macbeth and Hamlet, where there's, that archetype is already so much in place. And the inversions that are inherent in there are so precarious, because again, this is the alchemical crucible that Hoffman mentioned as well. And this is, of course, people like Bacon and authors of that time, and immense work, like I said, figurative, symbolic work like Shakespeare's and beyond, that have so much occultism and numerology in them. It's for a reason. And there are still hermetic principles that they were aware of, that or whether they were aware of or not, whether they were consumed only by conscious or subconscious, is up for debate. All this to say that these half-truths, so something like in a Hamlet, the line is, there is nothing neither good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. That can be, I used to know it to mean, okay, don't trust your thoughts. I get it. You move on from that. No overthinking is, I think, what people might deduce it to mean. However, it can be very extreme and nihilistic as well. There's a big gray area in life where this is good and bad at the same time, but some things are good and some things are bad. I think everyone can agree on that, except for extreme nihilists and Satanists, maybe. But there's a direct connection back to the assassins through the Freemasons, which again is involved in the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry and the story of Macbeth. So you get these inversions, And yeah, I mean, there's still some beautiful truths in there, but again, the story of love and Romeo and Juliet, like that's so extreme and it's so fatalistic and nihilistic, and yeah, nothing neither good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. Like you can just qualify yourself into it's all that's just your opinion, man. Like that's so much of what it is what my experience is fluid. I can be a woman. My experience is fluid. I can see you as being evil. My perspective is so open and shifting. And who's to say it's neither good nor bad? I could be saying that to you guys every fucking day with this podcast, called Who's to Say? Who's to say it's good or bad? Just you and your mind, and how developed and elevated is your mind, and is your mind inhabiting a body of this color? Well, then it definitely needs to be evaluated in this way, and that's all inversion, people, and that's what I'm cautioning against. That's what I'm decrying at the moment, is the caveat of inversion and deception. It's so at play right now in this world, again, just on the world theater and in the globe. Again, I challenge the globe theory. I'm not a globalist, and I'm not a globist. So that's good. You know that about me. I'm not seeking world domination, and especially not to deceive and misinform people as to the nature of this reality. And like I said, there's a lot of momentum that's gone into just that. There's a lot of schooling. There's a lot of there's all of it leading, media, literature. All of our inputs of today are so greatly influenced by these philosophies that are worth revisiting. Francis Bacon. I mean, this is really, I'm going to land the plane here. This is really to bring it home, and hopefully this is all. If it's not food for thought, maybe it's seeds for thought, bones for thought, something for you to either cultivate or just chew on a little bit. I hope it's a little bit meatier than that, and you just doused it in gravy the whole time. So Francis Bacon then became this materialistic bastion of scientism, and that's my biggest gripe with him, because to deny, I mean, I know he still had a knowledge of the spirit, but to transcend and control that spirit through matter, or at least deceive people into focusing on that for the sake of control, those are, I mean, that's become part of just one of the battles that we have to win, that we are called to participate in. And you do that through a spiritual centering. You do that through wading through as much refuse of information as you can, and just try to get quiet. And not try, I mean, this is my call to action to end today. Get quiet, see what's happening between your ears, go down into your heart. Feel free to stop in at your lungs and your gallbladder and your liver and your kidney and your ovaries and your testicle. I mean, check in, just check in, and have gratitude. If you're grateful, you're full of greatness. If you're thankful, you're full of thanks. So gratitude can be a bit of both, but however you think of it, have thanks for this experience, that you are here, that you're going to make the very most of it, that you trust that so there is some striving on your part, and your body is always seeking the waters of your body, especially your earth is always seeking to settle. Your fire is looking to stay alight. Your air is looking to circulate and stay clean, and your waters are always looking for level as well, for balance. And that I've never thought about this before. I've never felt about it like this before. It's just coming to me now. This is the beautiful part of flow, talking about water, and I may just have to go sit with that. But that is the call to action through inaction. The Tao, the doing but non-doing, the being but non-being, is do get quiet, get to know yourself, see how that meshes and jibes or not with the world, and hopefully I'll see you over there on your own path. I'll be over here on mine. So much love, and thank you so much for following me on today's journey.